And this story takes place 15 years ago, set 15 years ago, and it's back when Blythe and I, my wife now, Blythe and I were just dating, and I got the sense that maybe there was something there. The reason I did is because, well, it wasn't that I liked her, she's very likable, but I got the feeling that maybe she liked me, which isn't as easy. And the reason I did is because we'd been together for a year by then, and she still found me funny. And usually that's the first thing to go, and it wasn't. So we were driving up to Edmonton on this story. Now, when I say we were driving, Blythe was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and that's how we drive. Whenever we're in the car together, she's the one who drives, and the reason is, well, one is she likes driving, she loves it, but the second is I have this habit that if I'm driving and I'm talking and telling a story, I tend to slow down without realizing it. So if I'm telling Blythe a story and we're going 30 kilometers an hour down the Deerfoot and trucks are barreling past us, it makes it really hard for Blythe to follow the plot. So we just found it easier if she drives. And then that's how we found ourselves on the Deerfoot heading up to Edmonton to Brian and Jody's open house on Christmas Eve. Now, Brian and Jody had been holding an open house in their house and neighborhood, I think, for decades. And I'd been a few times before, but I hadn't been in a few years. And honestly, I was really nervous. I was really nervous because it was Brian and Jody. Now, I got to know Brian and Jody through their kids, Jay and Tracy, who were about my age. I mean, I actually have no idea if Jay was anywhere close to my age. I was far more interested in Tracy. But I would go over there, and I remember the first time I drove there, and I got there, and here's one lesson. I rang the doorbell, and Brian, the dad, opened the door and said, "That will be the last time you ring the doorbell. When you come to our house, the door is always open. You just open it, you step in, and you say, 'Hello.'" And that's what I learned from him. And that's why we were driving up to Brian and Jody's very open house. So we're driving up there, and at one point, Blythe said, "So are their kids, Jay and Tracy, going to be there?" And I said, "No, they both have work in Toronto, so they're not going to be back till Boxing Day or so. It's just going to be Brian and Jody and their friends." I said, kind of nervously. And I was describing, I said, "Well, look it. They live in like a 60s bungalow, a house like every bungalow you can think of in every city and every town in our country, the one where the driveway goes up, and then there's the door, and you open the door, and there's 3 steps that head into the kitchen, and there's the other door that might as well be painted on, because I've never seen anyone go in and out of it ever, and that's how their house looks." And I said, "Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a house cleaner than Brian and Jody's house." Jody, the mom, had this line she'd say, and she got it from her mom, Grandma Mac. Everyone called her mom Grandma Mac. And the line was, "Soap is cheap and elbow grease is free." And so their kitchen floor, you could comb your hair looking at the kitchen floor. It shone. It was unbelievable. Now, the only thing that would get her more excited than cleaning her house was, I remember once we took out the VHS machine to put in the DVD player. And she wasn't excited because, oh, finally I get to watch DVDs. She was excited because when we pulled it out, that gave her a chance to get in behind there and dust. And then she brought in the 10-year-old original box that the VHS machine came in. And she's like, "Look, it fits." Like it was going to put on weight or something. And then I remember she took the DVD box and put it wherever the VHS box used to be so that they'd be ready for when Blu-rays came out or ready for the apocalypse, whichever. It didn't matter. She just wanted to be ready. Honestly, I think Jody's life could have been sponsored by Tide laundry detergent. She was that kind of person. Now, Brian, he intimidated me. I mean, he intimidated a lot of people. It wasn't like because he was big, But he had this big energy, and he had a big laugh, and he had a big smile. But when things got serious with Brian, things got serious with Brian. The only thing cleaner than Jody's house was the car Brian drove. He had a file with every receipt ever from that car. He was the kind of guy, you know that sticker they put on your windshield with the numbers on it? He actually went and got his oil changed when those things matched up. He's the kind of guy that in his glove box, he had a book that he would write down how much gas he put in at every fill up and what the odometer said. Once I said, is that like for tax reasons? And he said, no, it's just good to know. I drove a Toyota Corolla when I first met them, and about a month in, I backed into something, I don't know what, and cracked the back taillight. Now, the bulb worked, but I had a hole in it, so I taped it with duct tape. And I clearly didn't do that good of a job because when it rained, it sort of leaked in. So for a few months, it looked like I was driving around with a fishbowl in the back of my car. And could you imagine what that did to Brian's brain every time I pulled up? Well, at one point, we were outside, and he says, you know, you can get that fixed. And I kind of laughed. Yeah, I know. And he said, Dave, look at me. You can get that fixed. I said, oh, maybe I should get that fixed. He said, that's a good idea. So the next day, I went and got it fixed. And he said, now, doesn't that feel good? You know what? It did. He was an influential man. He just wanted everyone around him to be great. Now, that wasn't why I was nervous. I mean, the car Blythe and I were driving was in perfectly good working order. But here's the truth. The reason I was nervous was because I used to be married to Brian and Jody's daughter. Now, Tracy and I hadn't been together for 5 or 6 years by then, but I got an invite. I got a Christmas card, and in it said, hey, Dave, Merry Christmas. We really hope you can make it to our open house this year, and please bring Blythe. We'd love to meet her. So I went, I don't know, Blythe, what do you think? And Blythe said, they seem like good people, and they've invited us. We should go. That's Blythe. And I was like, yeah, and she said, look, I will if you will. And I said, I will if you drive. And that's how we found ourselves, with me saying, okay, you turn here by the IKEA, you just go past Harry Ainley School into the neighborhood, and then down this street, and just park here on the street that I'd parked at hundreds of times before. Whew. So we get up, we got to the door, and I didn't ring the doorbell, and I opened it, and we stepped in. Now, the party was going by then. You could hear a bunch of talking in the living room, and I said, hello. And then you hear these big steps, and around the corner comes Brian Fly. And the first thing he says is, welcome, and you must be Blythe. And then Jody came around the corner, and they came down, and they give us these big hugs, and Jody's like, give us your coats, give us your coats. Here, take that wine, put it here. Can we get you anything to drink? Come on in. And then we walked into the living room, and there were a whole bunch of Brian and Jody's friends, some of whom I knew, some I didn't, and my heart was just pounding. And Brian said, hey, everybody, this is Dave. Many of you know him, some of you don't. And then he said, Dave is like a son to us, and this is his girlfriend, Blythe. And we were in. We sat down, and they asked Blythe a bunch of questions, I think because they thought she'd be nervous, which was me, but they asked her about what it was like growing up in St. Albert and what she was doing now. And the night flew by in the warmth of their home. And then we got in the car and drove up to St. Albert to Blythe's mom's, and I sat in the car vibrating with the kindness that they showed us. And then it wasn't until years later, till I had kids of my own, that it struck me that they weren't just kind, that how strong they were. Because even though Tracy and I had as kind and as respectful a breakup as a divorcing couple can have, it was still Brian and Jody's daughter. I believe all of us are shaped by the ones that love us, by the ones that show us what greatness was. And two of those people in my life are Brian and Jody Fly. And they are gone now, but their incredible spirit and strength and kindness live on in their tremendous kids, Jay and Tracy. And so they taught me that welcome isn't always an easy word, but it's a good word. Because sometimes the holidays aren't always happy, right? I mean, Charlie Brown did know something, and he found his way through. Because the holidays sometimes are those times where we are really aware that we're in a blended family, or we're really aware that we're in a broken family, or we're really aware that we're new to this country and we're just trying to figure it out and we're trying to build a home, but all we want is grandma back home to tell us it's going to be okay. And Jan Arden reminded us, didn't she, that there are people in this room today who are looking forward to a holiday that for the first time is going to be without mom, or without dad, or without a son or a daughter, or a husband or wife or friend or loved one. That's happening now. Brian Fly was a big bear of a man, a teddy bear, but a big bear of a man. And although they aren't with us now, this is what I learned from Brian and Jody and Jay and Tracy. I learned that if you can fix something, then you fix it. But on the times where you can't, sometimes the most powerful thing a big bear can do is open the door and say, welcome.